Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that tends to process traumatic events with dad jokes. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most Saturday mornings or available to download later in your podcast feed, unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Patrons get those perks.
Punk.
I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and he's a Caucasian male, mid-30s, with really great hair, and even when he's rotting, he smells like lavender. It's Andrew Ormsby, ladies and gentlemen.
It's all true except for the really great hair.
Each week we'll chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. She's your guide through these vast new movies. It's Alice Ginevra McKelly.
Ooh, so close. G'day.
You can be Allison if you want. I mean, it's totally up to you.
Could. Look, when I was a kid, I wanted everyone to call me Ariel as my nickname, so it could go anywhere.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Ariel. Although where you are, under the sea, is actually...
Would it be down under the sea, you know?
That's right. That is there you go. We are excited to have you here today with us to look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think all these movies are complete? We are excited to get into
we'll get into that.
That's right. That's a fair point. We don't know if they're complete or not. So we're going to talk about Cry Macho that came out this week. Had to do a little bit of shifting around. I think I had mentioned Eyes of Tammy Faye, I mentioned Eyes of Tammy Faye last week, and then we had talked about doing the Starling as well. We are kind of in that last moment right now of like a little bit of movie emptiness, and then it is gonna hit hard in like a week or two, and
once stuff hits.
Well, you've got Venom and Dune, and then all
Matrix.
The award stuff, and I mean, just the next few months are going to be absolutely wonderful as far as I'm concerned. Like, lots to talk about. But we are kind of in that last quiet month. But Eyes of Tammy Faye isn't playing locally until next week, so we weren't able to talk about that one. And The Starling also releases next week on Netflix, so we weren't able to talk about that one. So we swapped in the first half of What If, the first half of the What If season, which is an anthology show. It doesn't really matter that it's the first half. It's just the first 6 episodes. Yeah. So we'll be taking a look at that as well, and doing a best ever challenge of best ever Clint Eastwood as an actor movies. So not the ones he's directed, but the ones that he's acted in. And then, of course, we'll have Buried Treasure and all that fun stuff as well. Let's go ahead. Let's move into it. Let's cry macho. Mike Milo, a one-time rodeo star and washed-up horse breeder, takes a job from an ex-boss to bring the man's young son home from Mexico. Cry Macho is Clint Eastwood's latest movie. Apparently, he can turn these around in about 4 to 6 months. He's a one-take-and-done filmmaker. He is also the star in this one. Trying to think of anybody else in this movie you might know of. Maybe Dwight Yoakam. But other than that,
he's more of a country singer than an actor. So.
Yeah, and other than that, really, and not to talk about the performances or anything, but these aren't people I've really seen in many other things, which can be a good thing. But let's talk about it. What did you think of Clint Eastwood's latest, Cry Macho? Alice, let's start with you. Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
Okay, well, so let me just say, I don't think it's a good film, but it doesn't inspire enough passion for me to say I hate it. So I'm just landing in I didn't like it.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you? Like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? You're the Clint Eastwood fan amongst us.
It's true. I do love Clint Eastwood, and man, I hated this. It's really bad. It hurts to say, but this movie, I hated it.
Well, it'll surprise you to know I loved this movie. I'm kidding. I did. I'm on the very low side of didn't like it as well.
I almost had a heart attack.
No, I am with you, Alice. I don't feel passionate enough about it to say I hated it. Now, Andrew, I kind of get, because being a Clint Eastwood person, like that kind of brings that passion. Like you want it to be something better, and it's just not. It's a really for me, a bad movie experience. And so I can see that going into passion for you into the hate it category. But yeah, I didn't liked it, probably lower side of didn't liked it. It's one of those movies, the rare movie for me where I have so very little good to say about it that it's almost a surprise that I don't hate it. But it just, again, it was just, whatever,
100%.
A piece of bread. But yeah, I guess I get to start, since I'm kind of at the highest
technically
end of,
liked it the most.
technically, I guess. Yeah. Well, let's try to be positive here for a little bit. Here's what I will say. First of all, we say this all the time. Making a movie is hard. Making a movie when you are 90 plus years old is even
92.
harder. And yeah, he's 92, right? Is that right? Yeah. He's 92 now.
Siri told me he was 91, but Siri could be wrong.
Siri could be wrong. Andrew could be wrong. Everybody could be wrong. It is a possibility.
What if?
That 1 year makes such a distinction between 91 and 92. However old he is, it is even more difficult to make a movie. I would imagine. I've never been in my 90s, but to do that and to be behind the
You're
camera,
working on it.
and I'm trying to get there. Get there. And I just saw that. I say all that to say I have a lot of respect for anybody who can put a film on the screen. And the story is coherent. It's not like it does. It's not like I don't know what's going on. Alice is amused by my attempt to say nice things about this movie.
I'm sorry, I can't help.
We know the purpose of the story. We know what it
we know
wants
what's
to
going
do.
on.
It has a story.
It has a story.
There are characters. They say lines. It has a beginning and an end.
The pixels on my screen lit up and made colors and lights. No, there is a comprehensible story here. It has a heart to it. I know what's, and I respect what Eastwood is doing here, with a subculture that we don't see enough of in the movies. This is very much a Mexican movie in many, many ways. So there are those things about it where I go, okay, I get it. I understand it. I respect the process. I respect the ability. And that's about as far as I can go with positives. Did you guys have anything you wanted to bring out in the positive camp of things? Because I really had a hard time finding that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I guess if I'm gonna hang my hat on a moment in the movie, there's a segment where Clint Eastwood and is it Raffo? Is that what the character's name is?
Yeah, Raffo.
Yes.
Raffo.
Yeah. Where he and this young boy kind of settle down for a little bit in this town. And while the purpose of that scene is negating the movement of the story, it sure is. It's actively pushing against the motivation of the characters. I found it calming and just enjoyable. It was peaceful, and I was like, I could live in this part, this moment with these guys, because it's nothing has to happen here. Eventually they're going to get back to the story, but for right now I could see how a lot of people are in this moment going, please just move on with the story, get on with what you're supposed to do. But for me, I'm just like, this is nice. This is nice.
Well, you know why? Because we weren't really invested in the story they got away from. It wasn't like I wasn't like, please get back to that story, because I wasn't really invested in that story. So, hey, let's do this thing for a while.
That'll do it.
And yeah, it kind of works. Yeah, the movie definitely wants to be an old man, a boy, and a chicken. And here's their adventures. And I just never felt like any of that worked. Like I never felt, compelled in any way by, the things that can compel you in a movie. I have nothing wrong with a simple, straightforward story, right? Like that can be really good. I don't need big action set pieces and big, moments necessarily to make a movie good. But if you're not going to have those things, other things better be compelling. There better be a sense of humor to it that I find compelling. There better be a character relationship that I find compelling. And I think this wanted the Clint Eastwood, Eduardo Manette, relationship to be the compelling part. It just doesn't work. I don't care about them together. I never felt like, the emotional journey that they were on really worked. Like, I never felt like they were at odds the way the movie wanted me to, and I never felt like they were buddy-buddy the way the movie wanted me to. So there was no progress in that emotional journey. And so yeah, if you're going to be simple and straightforward, you better have something that's hooking me in, and this movie just doesn't have it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is, like, for example, I'm sorry, but the kid who played Raffo was, I don't know if it was just this movie, but from just watching this movie, I don't see him as a good actor. It was a bad performance.
Let me talk about this for just a second. And I we do try to stay away from, like, qualifying, especially, kids, but he's a little bit older. But here's the thing with Clint Eastwood that I would clarify this with. Clint Eastwood, because he's a one taken out director, he is not giving his actors a lot of chance to excel. And there are a lot of directors who direct actors better than Eastwood does. And Eastwood excels when he has polished professional actors who know how to go out there and nail it. And this movie doesn't have those people. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a group of polished professional actors who can nail that one or two take kind of thing. And so much of the performance relies on the director's ability to get that performance and to capture it. And so I don't hold it against this kid that it comes off this way, but you're right. It does, it doesn't, it's not believable. It doesn't come off as believable. I'm just not sure that's his fault completely.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. And that's why I wanted to say, like, I don't know if it's this movie or if we see him in the future, he could be in another movie and then I could be like, oh, he's great, But just if I'm just watching it off this movie and making a judgment, not a good performance. And to be honest, all the characters, and I think this really comes down as well to the screenplay, they were so one-dimensional. Even, like, Eastwood has maybe 1.5 dimensions at most, but okay, this is the best way I can describe this movie if anyone ever asks me my opinion on it. When I saw the poster, I thought it was an SNL parody. I thought, it was like Bill Hader doing his Clint Eastwood character. I thought this was the most Clint Eastwood poster I've ever seen in my entire life, with the dumbest name, like the dumbest title I've also ever seen in my entire life. And then I watched the movie and it was like one of those SNL parody trailers for the most Clint Eastwoodist movie of all time, but not in a good way. Because, I just, for reference, I'm in Australia, and so I finished watching this movie an hour ago, and I watched it with my partner, and we finished it, and he just said that was the biggest ego trip movie I've ever seen, where it was just Clint Eastwood wanting to be a cowboy and, like, having a bit of a white savior thing going on. And there was just nothing. Yeah, exactly what you said, Aaron. There was nothing compelling. I didn't care. Very early on, I realized what kind of movie this was going to be when the very opening scene has the most exposition before
exposition drop ever.
Oh, it's like the guys just walked in and all of a sudden it's like, oh, all your history, where we are now, and you're fired. Exposition drop. And I was like, I'm still sipping my drink for the first time. Yeah. And that was pretty much the movie. The amount of exposition, I think the kid says macho like 50 times every time he talks about the rooster. And it's just lazy writing. I think it just all comes down to lazy writing. And then, yes, I think as well, this is maybe something that required, if it had good performances, like if the performances really brought, or not the performances, but if the directing brought out what it needed to in the performances, we might have had something. But without it, it was just an SNL parody. Honestly, that's where it is. That's where I land.
I think it absolutely it lives in self-parody in a lot of ways, and that is unfortunate. There is something about Eastwood's later day movies that do all have that theme that seems to be about, I'm 90, but I'm still super attractive to women, and I still can ride a horse, and I can still can. And listen, I don't begrudge somebody as they age, wanting to be in romantic relationships or anything like that. It's just in this case, when you are the person putting it on screen, when you are the director, you're kind of pumping up your own ego in certain ways. And this is not an ageist thing saying, oh, you know, a 40-year-old woman would never be attracted to a 90-year-old man or anything like that. It's just saying you're the director, and it's obvious you have something to say about your persona that you want, you know, in here.
Well, that's the thing. If the relationship, because there's obviously one romantic relationship that kind of takes the lead of this whole movie. If it had developed in a way that was believable, you know, 50-year-old people can fall in love with 90-year-old people, you know, 30-year-olds can fall in love with 60-year-olds. It happens. That's fine. But I mean, every woman in this movie wanted to take her pants off for Clint Eastwood the moment he was in the room.
It was the same in The Mule.
Oh, The Mule was way worse.
Was it?
It was way worse.
Okay.
He had two threesomes in that movie.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Okay, because I was watching that and I was just like, come on, the woman can't even talk to the man and she wants to marry him. And then there was the mum at the beginning who's like one of the most attractive women I've ever seen in my entire life, and she's immediately wanting to bed him as some weird power thing, and I'm just like, this is just ridiculous. The man would break a hip. Like, it's just... and speaking of which, I think there was a moment I literally...
I think he has like a 10-year-old kid or something like that, so...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Good. Well, honestly, good for him. And that's the thing. If the relationship had been, like, if it had been developed in a way that I was like, oh, they've, you know, fallen in love in a way that people might fall in love. But it was just, it kind of just felt like he was like, and then there should be a romance in it. And I should get to kiss the girl, and I'm just like, ugh.
Well, you're also dealing with an actor who, for his entire career, that's who he's been. He has been the sex object. He has been the poster. You know, like, and for good reason. He's a super attractive man. Like, you know, there's a reason that he has that in his ego, and maybe we're wrong for telling him to drop that. I don't know. It just what it does is it dials down a little bit of the authenticity for an audience who is not used to you know, that kind of thing, especially when you're the one putting it on screen, right? Like, this is a terrible example, but I'm going to use it anyway. I'm thinking of the Jeopardy thing that happened recently, right? Where the executive producer basically made himself the host of Jeopardy after Alex Trebek died. Right?
Yeah.
And even before all the stuff came out about what he had said on podcasts or any of that kind of stuff, everybody's going, this is interesting. You're going to put yourself, you know, like you had this whole charade of, you know, inviting all these people to guest host, and the whole time you knew you wanted to do it, and you were going to make yourself the host. Like, you knew, like, you're a producer on the show. I feel that way with Eastwood sometimes, where it's like, you're the director. Like, you know, find a way to, you know, direct others to, you know, be those parts in the movie, instead of feeling like you have to direct yourself to be the gravitational center of what's going on. And that's not an age thing. That is a power thing. So that's kind of 100%. Where I end up on it.
I'm going to throw a lot of comparisons between this movie and Gran Torino, where I think that, you know, they're similar in some ways, and even made specifically in the same way, where Clint Eastwood puts himself opposite people who aren't actors, you know? And for me, that was one of the downsides of Gran Torino, is that the young man who played Tao in that movie and the rest of the people, I think they weren't Laotian, but he wanted to get authentically, they were Hmong, that's what they were. He wanted to get authentically Hmong people to you know, be,
which is admirable,
opposite.
I think.
Yeah. But he didn't get Hmong actors. He just got them. So whenever they were put on screen, it was like, oh, they're not really acting, like they're acting like they're acting, you know, like they're pushing the dialogue, and it comes across very authentic. I think the same thing is happening here. The problem with this movie, and spoilers, we're going to get into Gran Torino a little bit later, but whenever I think where this movie fails and where I think Gran Torino is elevated and is way above this one is the fact that there is a way more prevalent character story arc in Gran Torino, where you see Clint Eastwood's character go from this begrudging, disgruntled, angry old man to realizing that experiencing new things and forgiving yourself for your past mistakes, that all feels more genuine than what you're getting here in Cry Baby or
Yes.
Cry Macho. Yeah. Where I felt like it felt like a Cry Baby for some of the dialogue. But because also in Gran Torino, yeah, he's a hard ass, but at the same time, he's not doing things that are like beating up people that are like in their 30s, you know, and having people like, oh, you're pretty fast for an old man. And you're like, yeah, even no matter how many quick cuts you took in that moment, nothing is going to make me believe that Clint Eastwood is being fast in that moment and taking you off guard, or that his punches have anything behind them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know Clint Eastwood's awesome, and I know that he is, you know, the man's man whenever it comes to, you know, those type of like either westerns or, you know, police movies. Like, he is like the epitome. Like, young Clint Eastwood is the epitome. He even has there's even a line in this movie where he's talking about being macho and grit and stuff like that. And like, it's like I don't know if he realizes the analogy between what he's saying about the grit and being macho and still trying to be that guy when you're 92 in a movie. I'm like, is this going over your head right now, Clint? Because I don't think you realize what you're saying is kind of detrimental to what you're doing.
I wonder if there is a director that could direct him. I wonder if we're missing out on some really great Clint Eastwood performances because he's directing himself. Like, I wonder if there was a director who could take material that used a character that was, you know, an older, rough, tough guy or whatever, and do something interesting with it, do something emotional with it, have a real character arc for the journey. But because Clint's not behind the camera in that case, it doesn't have to have the ego boosting to it, right? Like, it can really let him embrace his age and make that part of the journey. And, you know, it's not like there haven't been 90-year-old performances that have. I loved seeing Dick Van Dyke in the new, you know, Mary Poppins, right? Like, I was like, how cool is it that Dick Van Dyke is still doing this stuff? And how impressive is that? But it never felt ego boosting in any kind of way because he wasn't the one, you know, making the movie, directing the movie. He was an actor. And I just wonder if because Eastwood has become such a director that we've missed out on maybe some late era great Eastwood performances from a different director. I wonder if that is just unfortunately something that, you know, we're not going to see.
And honestly, I feel...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, honestly, I feel like his last few films could have that he was in could have done with a different director, you know, that maybe they might have been better if they had a different director to really work on those scenes and not. I just feel like maybe he's married to being this like one and done type director, and it's like, good enough. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I'm Clint Eastwood, it's fine.
Was his last acting performance for another director Trouble with the Curve? Was that the last time?
See,
I think so.
That's what I was looking up. So Trouble with the Curve, but do you know the last one before that?
No.
In the Line of Fire, 1993.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think that is, oh man, that's really sad. Like, I think think it's really sad that that we've maybe missed some really great stuff from him, because he has a charisma. He is an incredible human being. I just think the ego of putting himself on screen is, you know, putting some sort of weird false shine on it that another director wouldn't do. They'd try to make it authentic and feel real. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I think that's just evident in this movie, especially. It's very physically evident in the scene where he's breaking in the horse, and it was a bit comedic in the way it was done
Cringy.
because it was so far away, and then it was like in, at a high angle for like 2 seconds, and then it was far away again.
Yeah, it's just
and
Clint Eastwood going like this a little bit, and then
yeah,
far
and me and my
shot,
partner literally laughed. We laughed out loud because of how awkward the editing was. Because I remember we were like, "That's not Clint Eastwood," and then as soon as it went in, we're like, "Oh, it's definitely not Clint Eastwood," like. And so, but really, okay, the real thing I think as well that this movie suffers from is that it is missing a bit of a third act. It doesn't really have one.
Agreed.
There's no climax. There's no sense of climax. There's nothing it's building to. And all moments of tension just kind of like, I literally was saying out loud, like, oh, that was easy. At every moment that should have been a moment of tension, especially there is a part at the end where they're kind of confronted by two different elements that could have made for their own very compelling third acts, and they just kind of go away. And I'm just sitting there kind of going, well, what was the point of this entire movie? There was this pretend tension that never happened. Everything that even remotely could have been interesting was dealt with easier than like ideal going to the grocery store. Like it was just it just felt a bit disappointing, especially when the way the movie ends is in a way that I just didn't feel anything. It ended, the credits rolled, and I was just like, well, that was a movie. That was a movie. Well, it was a film.
It's because I believe what we are supposed to feel, the journey we are supposed to go on that the movie does not deliver, is antagonistic relationship between old man and boy turns into loving relationship between old man and boy. The problem is the movie isn't interested in showing us how that happens in any interesting way. And by the time you get to the end where I guess they're buddy now, like we haven't seen that catharsis. We have had no emotional catharsis with these two through this entire movie.
We literally skip it. We skip it all because there's a bit of a time jump of 2 weeks. And I remember just being like, oh, it's been 2 weeks, like,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they hadn't technically said that over the phone, like, we're taking you 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, it's been that long. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
There
was one thing I want to shout out good about this movie.
Hey, let's do it. That's a good way to. That's a good way to finish this out. Let's do it.
Oh, no post-credit scene. there's a moment where Clint Eastwood and Raffo are in a like this chapel, and they're about to lay down for the night, and Clint Eastwood is talking about like his son and his wife, and there was a sense of disarming and like letting go of your emotions that I hadn't seen from Clint Eastwood in a really long time. I'm like, oh wow, so Clint, you're just gonna open up and be vulnerable. And it was maybe it's just because I rarely see Clint Eastwood in that mindset that it was actually kind of disarming. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna live in this moment because this is a rarity right here. So I actually really like that scene a lot.
Well, there you go. We will end on a positive for
Still hate the movie.
A crime Macho. Even with 2 didn't like it and I hated it. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk a little bit about what if. Reimagining noteworthy events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and creating a multiverse of infinite possibilities, Disney Plus brings us the TV show What If, based on a comic series of the same name that does very similar things. This is animated, and we get some sort of kind of combination cell shading, rotoscoping kind of animation with this, and a lot, not all, but a lot of the original voice cast come back to play their roles in these transitions, including, I think, the last technical performance from Chadwick Boseman.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is voicing Black Panther in at least one of these episodes, maybe a couple.
And 3 so far.
So there you go. So So yeah, what did you guys think? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? We're dealing with the first 6 episodes. And again, as an anthology series, we're dealing with 6 different stories here so far. Will they come together in some way towards the end? Who knows? I don't think so, but we'll see what happens. But Andrew, what did you think? You liking this, loving this, hating this, disliking this, or it's just okaying this?
I'm really liking this. I'm having a lot of fun with this. Yeah.
Good. Alice, what about you?
I'm going to say high side of liked it, and that's just because there's a couple episodes I love, there's a couple episodes I like, there's a few episodes I like really like to like, and then there's one episode in particular that I did not like. So I'm going to land on really liked, or like high side of liked and low side of really liked.
Yeah, very nice. I think I'm lower than you guys. I may squeaked into the liking it. But I think I'm going to go very, very high side if it's just okay.
Oh, wow.
I think, it's amazing how thin that distinction is between the very low side of liked it and very high side of just okay. But I think I want to go there because I do think some of the negatives that I have do kind of push me down into that level. But I'm excited to hear from you guys what you're really liking about it. So, Andrew, why don't you kick us off on this one?
I enjoy the fact that I don't have to fully commit my, investment to a specific episode or to the story as a whole. It's relaxing because it's the first time ever since the first Iron Man movie that the ramifications of what I'm seeing are not going to, that we know of, are not going to have,
yes.
are going to have any impact on the MCU as a whole. That I get to let my guard down and just enjoy a hypothetical what could have happened at some point in the story that we've been told so far. And there have been some episodes where I'm like, oh, that's a fun concept. I really wish I could have seen where that could have progressed because I think that's really fun. There are other episodes where I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a fun little look at what could have happened. I don't need to see it ever again. Unlike Alice, I don't think that there's been one that I haven't liked. I've either liked them or I've really liked them. And I think there's even one episode I would just flat out say, oh man, I could do with like 7 or 8 more episodes of this story arc. But yeah, overall,
is that the Doctor Strange one?
No, it's not the Doctor Strange one. Actually, the one that I love the most is where T'Challa becomes Star-Lord. I think that story arc was so fun. Maybe it's because the Guardians of the Galaxy universe is so full of levity that episode in particular, like it was just fun. Like it was ridiculous seeing some characters that we'd seen as villains, be good guys, and that it was lighthearted enough to where I could go, oh yeah, that was fun. The Doctor Strange one is like the one that I could look at and go, you know what? That one has the possibility to be the one that could be if any episode so far could be tied into the MCU that we know. I think the Doctor Strange one is the closest one that I could be like, that could, be shown in either Multiverse of Madness or in Spider-Man No Way Home. But yeah, it's been fun. I like how it starts off with the Peggy Carter becoming Captain Carter. That was a really fun episode. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm glad I finally get to let down my guard, so to speak.
Alice, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's nice to just have something where you don't have to be like, oh, and this ties into that and this, and then you have to like dissect it for 3 hours after watching it, Loki, and like have your whole mind exploded. I mean, having said that, taking all of this with a giant grain of salt, because there have been rumors and there's absolutely possibility that some of these episodes, and honestly, I have a theory that this is kind of a bit of a testing ground. They're trying all these things that maybe executives or whoever it is aren't quite confident enough to give their own airtime, and then if people like it based on their reception of the episodes, they might integrate it or bring it to the actual MCU, like the full MCU. But I've enjoyed going on the journey. My favorite episode is the Doctor Strange one. I think that's just excellent. Like, oh my goodness, I was glued to that screen the entire time. The visuals were stunning. The story was tragic but amazing. And then I also really liked the Captain Carter one and the Guardians of the Galaxy type one. Also, I think I was wrong. I think Chadwick's in 4 of the 6 episodes so far, and I think he's 5.
He's supposed to be in 5
course.
of them.
Oh,
is
5
what,
total.
is what IMDb says.
Okay.
Yeah,
he's slated for 5.
That's cool. That's cool. And that's been really nice too, because like, seeing him get so much time in this version of the MCU, it's been really great. It's been sad. Like, I've definitely been like, no, like, I'm really sad that I don't, because I the more I see this as well, the more I think he was meant to be the next Iron Man. He was meant to be the next Tony Stark character that gelled everything together. And it's sad to know that's never going to get to happen, because he would have been so great. But yeah, I just think, and also because it's in animation, it is really cool to just see the visuals just explode literally in Technicolor, and so that's also been really fun to see, and a great way to immediately differentiate yourself outside of the, typical MCU. Because if this was live action, it might be a bit more difficult, but this way, I think it would have been much easier to get all the most of the talent back, because it's like, just record it in your in your bedroom and then send it through. And then it's like B, it's just my mind is immediately like, okay, this is a different hypothetical experience. And that's something I just love. I love thinking about hypotheticals, thought experiments, going into like that philosophical aspect of like, oh, but what if, and so this is really hitting that part of me as well.
That last part is my favorite part of this series. It has been my favorite part of looking forward to this series. I was very excited for What If, because of the idea of the freedom of exploring real different concepts with these characters, understanding, different ideas for them. That is really appealing to me. And for the most part, the show is willing to at least make an effort at going there. And so I appreciate that. It allows the show to be a little darker on occasion. There are at least 2 of these first 6 episodes are really dark. Like, and they don't
one and
they don't feel the need to be like, gotta land the happy ending, like there isn't that thing. And I really like that. I do like that. As I transition to some of the things I didn't like, I will say in regards to that, the show still has too much invested in callbacks, in things that we've already seen, things that we feel like we want to see again. I'll start with the Captain Carter episode. I love the idea that Peggy Carter became the super soldier, and what that might look like. But the show doesn't have the guts to make the original Captain America, the Chris Evans, right?
Chris, yeah.
I don't know why my mind just blanked. Yeah. So the Chris Evans,
Steve Rogers,
the Steve Rogers character, it doesn't have the guts to make the Steve Rogers character the same, level of comparison as the Peggy the Peggy character was in the original. It has to give him a superpower, has to have him come save the day a couple times, there's this element of, oh, we know the audience loves Steve Rogers, we better have him do something. No, you're in What If. Have Steve Rogers be like the doting wimpy boyfriend that he would have been. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's cool. I love that idea. But no, and not only do you give him a superpower, you make him save the day like 2 times. Like, it's one of those things where the show, and that's just one of the episodes. There are other examples in some of the other episodes as well, where like I'll do the Doctor Strange one. So Doctor Strange has this this thing happen where instead of the car accident, I think the title of the episode is "What if he lost his heart instead of his hand?" So in the accident, he loses Christine instead of injuring his hands so bad. That's a really interesting thing. But then the episode goes in and like hits all these same Doctor Strange points from that thing on. Like he still, embraces the mystic arts. He still fights Dormammu. He's still like, it's like if we don't give the audience these things that they know, they won't accept the things that they don't. And I'm just like, no, be true to your what if concepts. Like really embrace them. What is different about Doctor Strange because of that? Where, maybe the Dormammu thing gets solved differently, or, maybe he's not there for that, or I don't know. It just seems like for some, and again, this is sounding like I hate the show. I don't. I'm just saying that this is a big part of some of the disappointment I have with the show, even as I'm enjoying some of it, is, I really wanted them to embrace it. And I feel like they're still kind of catering to an audience. Do I understand that? Sure, of course I do. I get catering to an audience that loves this stuff. But I just think, this was the opportunity to really do something different. And, in some cases they do. I think the zombie episode, is really different. There's some winks in there. There's some callbacks. That's fine. I don't mind occasional wink and callback. Just when it's affecting the overall story in some of these is, kind of one of my negatives.
Yeah.
The other thing I disagree on, I think with you guys, I don't like the animation style. I enjoy that it's animated in some of the things they can do with animation, but I really find whatever style they're going for very off-putting. That's a personal thing. I don't know what it is. I guess it's the rotoscoping aspect to it that feels, just a little weird to me. So that's distracting me a little bit, keeping me from kind of being on that next level.
They're trying to make it look like a comic book.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right.
In my brain, it's kind of like they took the style of Invincible and the style of Into the Spider-Verse and like melded them, because that's how. And then also they kind of try to make it a little bit. There are times when that filter that like used to exist where it like makes you into the cartoon version, not the
Cell
Pixar
shading.
version, but it's like
sure.
the cell shaded version of yourself. Like that's kind of what it looks like.
Right,
And
exactly.
actually, one of my negatives is that it's not a negative, it's more of a nitpick, but it's like for some of the characters, it's so well done in terms of the accuracy of their depiction. But then in some of the characters, it's like they got lazy and we're like, like in the most recent episode, Pepper Potts, I was just like, she doesn't look anything. How do they get some people like Killmonger and Tony Stark so right, and then they just throw her, depiction completely away? So that was something that kind of pulls me out sometimes as well, especially because they took the time to find a voice actor who could replicate Gwyneth Paltrow's tone of voice. Like it's not an imitation, but it's very similar. It's got that like kind of nasally Gwyneth Paltrow tone, but then they kind of dropped it on the depiction. And also I should say the episode I really, really didn't like is the most recent one. It's the Killmonger one. I just thought it was a bit of a lazy what if. And I was just kind of the whole time I was just like, nothing about this compels me. It doesn't make any sense. And this kind of also leads me into something that I have noticed for the last few episodes where I just feel like they haven't quite, it's almost like they didn't decide on an ending. I feel like there is some of the episodes have endings where they were satisfying, like not necessarily they closed it out, but I was like, yes, that's where that particular arc ended, especially the first few. But the last few, and especially, have very much ended in I feel like they could have put a to be continued at the end.
Yeah, open-ended.
And but it's so open-ended. I'm just like, I don't feel like what we've just seen. The story arc has not been closed. Like I'm still kind of sitting here going, okay, but how does this end at all? It's not. And so that's something that's kind of frustrated me a little bit more this time around as well.
Well, I will say you guys mentioned, rumors that stuff might play in. I have thought from the very beginning, because they're heading into the multiverse, that all of this is canon. Like I see all of this as just multiverse canon.
Well, it is. It is
especially because you've got the Watcher, over all these kind of being our guide and telling us about. Yeah. So I fully expect them to play into larger storylines eventually, or to be revisited even within the show.
Well, they've slightly
actual multiverses.
confirmed that at least Captain Carter and Supreme Doctor Strange will they have basically teased that they're going to play some sort of a role in the Doctor Strange Multiverse into Madness movie, which I have to say, every single time a new show comes out or something, they're all like, oh, it's going to play a role in Doctor Strange Multiverse into Madness. And I'm like, my gosh, how many things are going to be in this movie? You know, pretty much everything that's come out since since Endgame is playing into Multiverse of Madness, and I'm like,
it really does remind me of the early days of Marvel when it was like, can they pull off a team up movie? Like, can they really pull that off? Like, that's going to be so hard. You have, you know, Tony Stark, Thor, Captain. Can you really put them all in the same movie and make it work? Like, you know, and they did it. And so now there's a lot of, I feel the same way, where it's like, can you really touch on all these multiverses and make it interesting and make sense and not feel cheap and whatever? And I hope they can pull it off again, you know, if they, you know, do another magic trick and make it work.
Yeah, it was like the first Avengers was, can you pull off a team up of all these actors? This one's going to be, can you pull a team up of all these studios?
Yeah, there's that as well. I do think that makes sense what you said. The Doctor Strange and the Captain Carter episodes do have a common being that is in both of them that I also thought was interesting. I think they named it the Champion of Hydra in the first one. So, you know, I don't know. It'll be maybe the Champion of Hydra will show up in the multiverse movie as well. I don't know.
Who knows?
But, who knows what's going to happen? The other thing, the other negative thing I wanted to mention is I feel like I agree. It makes it nice and easy for them to be like, hey, record this stuff in your own studio, or we'll take you to a studio there and record it. But I think you can tell. I think with some of these performances and the way they're stitched together, that you can tell there's a lot of different rooms, you know, going on here. And I think the performances do suffer for that. I think if I had one recommendation, would be, yes, you can still do it remotely. And I know Marvel listens to the podcast, so Kevin,
Feige is actually in the chat right now.
Yeah, so
he's
Kevin,
he's under Phil Sousa. Yeah, that's actually.
I know everybody's got tough schedules, but you're not asking them to drop everything for a couple months to film a movie. You're asking them to drop everything for a day to record audio. Get them all in a place where they can see each other, perform off of each other if they're in the same scene. Because and they may be doing that for some of it, but there are some times you can just tell, like, they are piecing together performances that did not realize, you know, what was going on, or at the very least, maybe like they heard the line and tried to react off of it, but there's just something more organic about, you know, being able to see each other act together. So that's my one thing. Like, I do think it negatively impacts the show. And again, as the one who has been a little more negative than you guys, I will just say again, I actually am having a good time with this show. I do think it is the high side of It's Just Okay. So Yep. Anything else from you guys?
I'm interested to see where it's going to go to. Like, I don't know why I have a sense that this final episode's going to be some sort of bleed, because I feel like as well the Watcher is having more and more of a role in these. So is there going to be a bleed with these main characters at the final episode where they all that's maybe where the multiverse starts to crack and we kind of see them start to blend together. Again, I feel like this is what I'm going to say after every, in between every Marvel show, but it's like, I'm very intrigued. I have theories. I don't know. And I'm wondering if they're going to pull it off. But also, I will just say I'm very, very satisfied with the choice of Jeffrey Wright for the voice of the Watcher. That man has one of the most dulcet tones, and he could anything. I will listen to it,
I'll be your
great
guide
pick.
Through vast inconsistencies.
Pretty good.
Exactly. It's
so
like
good.
Some Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Mm-hmm.
bit of a voice going to it. And I'm just like, I believe that you do watch all of this, especially with Westworld and everything. I'm just like, yep.
Totally.
I would actually really like a full episode where Uatu, who is the Watcher, if he was the main character, there's actually a really interesting comic where he dies and like he's found on Earth, and you're like, wow, who killed the Watcher? Because the Watchers are incredibly powerful beings in the Marvel universe. So if they were to do that specific comic arc, I think that it would be really, really fascinating. And what I've liked about What If so far is that they haven't been leaning on, multiversal comic stories. I think everything that I've seen so far has been pretty original. Like, there hasn't been a need to like do a comic adaptation of like a anything that I've seen. I think it's Original Sin is the one I'm thinking. Yeah. So, but it's I'm liking the originality and that they're not leaning on comic, because I don't know if Marvel has done a zombie a story arc. I know DC has, and they have so brilliantly named it Deceased, which was and it was actually an incredibly fascinating story arc. If Marvel has done
they
it,
did. Marvel has one. It's called Marvel Zombies. They weren't as clever with their title, and actually they actually slightly differentiate in that the zombies in the comic books are much more sentient than the ones in the show. So in the show, they're much like zombies, except they can also like use their powers and, special skills or whatever. While in the comics, what's interesting is that they're still sentient. They just have this like overwhelming hunger to eat, people. And so there's this, for example, there's this great bit in the comic books where Peter Parker's like, oh my God, what have I done? Because he's just eaten Mary Jane and Aunt May. And he's like, but I can't, oh my God, what have I done? But I can't help myself. And so it's a great sort of like, it's a really interesting sort of comic series because it's not meant to be taken that seriously, but it's also a great way of them because they're still heroes and they're also because they're the Avengers and everything. They're the reason the world's essentially ended because they're too powerful to stop. But they're also they feel really bad about it, So
I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark. I have a tummy ache.
Just an eye.
Yeah. Well, I hope they connect him. I just imagine one of the last episodes, like Loki's going to show up in a TVA uniform, or there's something's going to happen at some point to connect stuff. Marvel can't.
It'd be cool if he showed up and then he's like, oh my God, why my cartoon? Like he's it's a different reality. That'd be cool.
No, that would not be cool. That is a level of fourth wall breaking I do not want to see Marvel go into. That is Deadpool.
But they have to introduce Deadpool into it.
That's the only permission they have is Deadpool.
Okay.
Nobody else can break the fourth wall. That to me, that will signal something that I will not be a fan of. If any other character other than Deadpool breaks the fourth wall, that'll be rough. I mean, they edge close with some of their humor is very winking, but it all still feels world real. It doesn't feel like they have to be aware that there are people watching them. Now, obviously, the Watcher is breaking the fourth wall in some ways. He's definitely talking to somebody, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's us, the audience. Like it could be him just telling a story. So that's just typical narration kind of stuff. Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but since we brought up Deadpool, I still really want the story arc that was kind of teased as a possibility where Deadpool actually sits down with Kevin Feige and Kevin Feige hires him to kill the Fox and Sony universe, and his payment is to get into the MCU.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Which I thought was amazing. Oh, I really wish that was like how that happened, because obviously Marvel or Kevin Feige has actually confirmed Ryan Reynolds will be Deadpool in the MCU, so that story arc of him sitting down with Feige and there's just too much hassle to get all the people from the Fox and Sony, so we're gonna need you to kill off these people, and as payment we'll let you into the MCU. I'm like, oh, that would be the perfect introduction for the MCU, and then it would also help tie off any loose ends with Fox and Sony, that they
What if
had
they did it
lingering.
like a Pixar short? You know how? Because I mean, it's Disney, right? So what if they did it in the same vein of like having a Marvel short, but it's like a Pixar short, and then having the movie after it, and then that could be maybe like the next main Marvel movie or the Deadpool movie, and it's like, yeah, and that would be really cool.
Yeah. I just want maybe a cross comic book thing where I can watch them asking who watches the Watchmen watching the Watcher. That's what I think.
The Watchmen's
really...
Watchers. Well, they kind of have that.
Yeah,
the one above all. Yeah.
All right, let's move into the best ever challenge. Before we do, though, thank you so much for those who support Sif Pop through Patreon. Patreon.com/SifPop. Starts at $3 a month, and there's different levels with different kind of fun things that we do. One of those is a bonus podcast every single week. You get a little bit of extra conversation. We talked for 15 to 20 minutes about Norm Macdonald this week on the Sif Pop bonus episode. So if you're curious to hear our thoughts on that or many other things, going back through the other weeks. But we try to do that weekly and put that in your own special podcast feed that, by the way, also has no commercials. So when you are a member of Sif Pop, it's a commercial-free experience in those bonus podcasts, as well as the main podcast is commercial-free as well. So you can all check that out at patreon.com/SifPop. All right, into the best ever Clint Eastwood movies, and we are talking about movies that he has acted in. The Grimace from Alice says to me, I'm a little behind on my Clint Eastwood, guys. Give me some time. I'm just a youngin'. Give me some time. Is that what's going on, Alice?
I mean, it's that, and also similar to you, Aaron, I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns, so I've never been like, you know what I feel like watching? A Clint Eastwood movie, because that's like 80% of his repertoire. And so I went and looked at his IMDb, and I was like, oh, that's fine. I'll make a list, la, la, la. And then I was like, oh no. And so this is going to be very interesting.
Very fun. I love it. We'll go number 5 to number 1. Of course, we can... do some trumping if we have it higher than somebody else. All right, so let's go to Alice. Alice, why don't you start us off with your number 5?
My number 5 is Casper, because he is in the movie as Clint Eastwood, uncredited, and it counts because it's on his acting at IMDb. And I was like, good enough.
Man, I don't remember this movie.
Trump. No, I'm joking.
I would have been shocked.
That'd be the greatest thing ever if Andrew had Casper at number 1.
Yeah. I think that would have shocked everyone. It's like, and all of a sudden that's
the
his
internet
favorite
would have
movie of all time.
just shut down.
Yes. The ghost, the boy in the Casper is my number 1.
Yeah. I mean, look, is it as good? No. But we can still talk about it.
Sure.
So yeah, it's okay. This is a special place in my heart because it's one of the VHSs I had as a kid that I would play on repeat. Because yes, when I was a kid, VHSs were still a thing, and I used to watch that in Italian, so that's the way I've consumed that movie. I have never watched it in English, so this would be very interesting to see. But I just, it was a perfect film to sit your 6-year-old in front of and make her watch it like 30 times so that you could do the vacuuming as my mum used to do. And that's how I remember
it.
And
it's
known
as parenting. But continue.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't really seen it
since movie. Then, if you saw it dubbed, then
that's right.
Well, that's true. That's true. Oh no, it counts. It counts. Animated.
It still counts.
No.
But no, it's just a fun sort of like perfect 2000s nostalgia. Casper, I feel like, is honestly, Casper is one of those like characters that could do with a bit of a remake if they were interested in it. That is something that had a lot of like fame and nostalgia back in the day, but people, I feel like, recognize it more by name and by look than anything else. So if they could figure out an interesting and intelligent story behind it, that could be cool. And Clint Eastwood is in it. That's my
There you go. Well done, Alice.
For that.
That is why I went with you first. I was so curious what you squeezed in at the bottom of the list.
Aaron.
Yeah, my number 5 is Unforgiven.
Trump.
Yeah, I assumed it would be trumped, so we will let you talk about that when you have that, either one of you. What about your number 5, Andrew?
So, unlike Alice, I have seen many of Clint Eastwood's movies, and I actually put limits on my list. So, I would only have one American Western, one spaghetti Western, one like cop movie, and drama and stuff like that. So, just keep that in mind as I'm going on. Like,
interesting.
If I would have had because I didn't want to have every single one of mine being like Fistful of Dollars, $few dollars more, so I wanted to limit myself. So I'm going to start off with my number 5, which is Dirty Harry.
Ooh, Trump.
Oh, all that exposition and I get trumped.
Nice.
I love it. I love it, actually. Yeah.
All right. That's okay. You can keep talking about it because it's my number 4. So
there we go. On to your number 4. Well, Alice, actually, you start talking about it because you had it a little bit higher. So tell us about Dirty Harry.
Well, there are 2 movies on my list that I have my university degree to thank because I wouldn't have seen them had it not been forced upon me by my curriculum. So Dirty Harry is one of them. And it was just, honestly, it was nice to see Clint Eastwood in not a cowboy role because up until that point, hadn't really happened for me. And especially because I'm not a Western fan, but I do enjoy a good, corrupt cop, like rundown cop, sort of hunting down the bad guy, but hating the world as well. Yeah. And that's, I feel like one of the classics. And I mean, I don't even need to say the quote for everyone to know what it is, but
it's his most famous quote.
It is, yeah. And it's got it has the perfect Clint Eastwood face behind it as well. It's not only perfect in his execution of the words, it's perfect in his facial execution as well. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's you know what? It's actually, unlike Cry Macho, excellent title, Dirty Harry. That's everything you need to know about the movie. And it is just, honestly, it's fun, which I did not expect going in. I was going to be like, oh Lord, here we go. And I ended up being like, cool, and then being able to talk about it at uni. So yeah, definitely one that I did not expect to like as much as I did.
Nice. Andrew?
Did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Somebody was going to do it.
Yeah. Do I feel lucky? Do you, punk? No. Yeah, I came across Dirty Harry a lot later. I say later. I was still like 18 or 19 when I saw it. But it was one of those movies where for me growing up, the cop dramas that I had seen were a lot more, I guess you could say, lighthearted, I guess, like the Lethal Weapons, where it's it's a cops who, they take justice into their own hands sort of thing, but Dirty Harry was like my first introduction to the darker side, I guess you could say, of the cop who plays by his own rules and sort of thing. Like, yeah, he gets the job done, and this is going to be a weird parallel. But Alice, do you remember? I think it was a couple. Whenever we were doing Michael Rooker movies, we were talking about Mississippi Burning, and how you said, I think you said at the beginning, I can't believe I remember this. I think you said at the beginning you were very much more on Willem Dafoe's side in that movie, but as the movie progressed, you became more like, well, Gene Hackman, yeah, you just get, the movie just beats you down to where you're like, yeah, Gene Hackman, he's the one, yeah, it's not the law, but he's going to get it done, And that's actually, I think, very comparable to how Clint Eastwood is in Dirty Harry, except we never get the chance to feel like the Willem Dafoe character. It starts you off with, yeah, he's going to go order a hot dog, and then he's just going to wait, sit outside that bank, wait for it to get robbed, and then shoot everybody as they come out. No freeze, put up your hands or anything like that. He just walks across
Gets the job done.
With that 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world that could blow your head clean off. Yeah. Oh, I love Dirty Harry so much. Yeah.
Aaron, I feel like when you told us the list, Andrew was just like, yes.
Yeah.
He read that.
Yeah. Oh, I came up with the list.
This Andrew was the one that suggested this list.
Oh.
So yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, I've seen Dirty Harry recently. You know, for me, one of the things I really respect about it is, and it's not the only movie doing this at this time, but it really kind of launches the anti-hero kind of thing in some interesting ways. And yeah, I think audiences were just ready for it. So yeah, Dirty Harry. Yeah.
Not to keep going off of, not to keep prolonging this, but the villain in this, he doesn't even have a name. He's just the killer,
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But he is so vile and evil that it makes rooting for Harry that much easier. So,
which is nice. It's sometimes, I know that now it's better, or it's more common to give dimension to your villain, to give them, character and motivation and understanding. But sometimes you just want your bad guys to be bad guys. I don't care. I just want them to be evil, and I want them to be beaten.
Yeah.
That's it. And
so
it's
set up
just
simple
nice
stakes.
to have that.
Simple stakes. Yeah, definitely. All right, that means we're at my number 4, I believe.
Yep.
I don't think this will get trumped. I would be very surprised. I have A Perfect World at number 4. I really, really enjoy this movie. I think it's one of Kevin Costner's best performances, if not his best performance. I think Eastwood also directed this one, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And really was one of the first movies I was like, oh, okay, Clint Eastwood's got an eye for this, understands how things are done. There's a definite kind of moral conundrum aspect to this movie that I'm always going to really appreciate. And yeah, and it has one of my favorite lines in all of cinema that Clint Eastwood delivers, and that's when he says, "Well, I do like tater tots." That's in this movie. So
sure is.
So yeah, you'll have to check it out for context.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's A Perfect World.
In Cry Macho, we have an old man taking a young boy under his wing. Same thing in A Perfect World, except it's more just leave out the kidnapping part,
In the chicken. There's no chicken.
There's no chicken. Yeah.
That's right. No,
actually, I think Perfect World is one of those hidden gems. A lot of people haven't seen it, and I highly recommend it because it is such a unique story that but I think that, whenever you have high caliber actors, where Gran Torino and this one and Cry Macho fall, where you just want to be authentic, but if you get really good actors, you can do the one take and it'll be good,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. Well, and I think he's gotten even more as he's gotten older into that real one take thing. He was always a quick shooter, but I think even as he has, gone further, it's gotten even more just like, that's it, I'm done. Next
he's gotten
thing.
less patience. He's like,
now he's like halfway through the scene. He's like, it's fine. They get the idea.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
I'm not done with all my dialogue. It's fine.
What's your number 4, Andrew?
My number 4 is Gran Torino.
I'm going to trump that one.
Okay.
All right. Well, Alice, what do you got at number 3?
Well, this is my second of 2 movies that I've only seen because of uni, and that is A Fistful of Dollars. And I'm so sorry to say this, Andrew. It's the only one I've seen in the trilogy.
It's fine.
So,
fine.
And that's because, again, I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns. So every time I go to watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I'm like, but I don't want to. And then I don't. And so
it's a lot. It's an undertaking. It's a 3 hour plus movie. So
that's the thing. And I know I need to watch it because obviously it is one of the, best movies of all time, but also because it's a spaghetti Western, and as an Italian, I'm, prescribed to watch that before I die. So I will get around to it. Sure. But A Fistful of Dollars is the one I've seen. And it is, it's a Western. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than Shane, which is the other Western I had to watch at uni, and I did not like that one. And I enjoyed it more than I thought, especially considering that, of course you do, but I enjoyed it more than I thought, especially considering that going in, I was like, oh, okay, it's this Western trope. It's the guy rolls into town and he's got the 2 people and he's got to fight against the bad people and blah, blah, blah. But then as you get into the movie, you're like, oh, oh, is there an extra element at play here? Okay. And then that allowed me to get into it a little bit more. And yeah, obviously it's the first of the Man with No Name trilogy. So there's a lot of setup, I guess, going on where you kind of are getting to know this guy, but not really. Because that's the thing. You don't really get to know him, but you get to know him enough to hold on to him for, the rest of the trilogy, going into obviously the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as it's a spaghetti western, it's also a great sort of entry into that whole genre. And it's just, it was a lot more fun than I ever thought it was going to be. And so that's why it's number 3 on my list. And one of the only westerns that would be this high up. I'll say that much, that are pure westerns that aren't like Django or anything like that. So,
Sure.
Nice.
It's actually one of the few The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the only of the Man with No Name movies that isn't based off of a Kurosawa samurai movie. The rest of them are. This one here is based off of Yojimbo, which is a great movie. I highly recommend it.
I went to watch that afterwards as well, and I enjoyed that too. So
yeah, it's interesting seeing the parallels between the wandering gunslinger and the what would you call them? They're not. They're samurai, but they're Ronin.
Wandering samurai.
The Ronin.
Oh yeah,
the Ronin.
The Roman Ronin.
Yeah, the Roman Ronin. He's Roman. He's Roman. But it's interesting seeing that parallel, and it's something that Sergio Leone really was able to. He had the eye for making that transition to a Western setting really fascinating, because if you think about samurai, noble, stuff like that, but then you think about the Old West, which is the exact opposite of nobility. It's murder and survival of the grittiest. So being able to take that story and transition it was fascinating. And you can't help but love the music. The Ennio Morricone music in that trilogy is just beautiful. Gotta love it. So yeah, I if I didn't put the limits on myself, I would definitely have had Fistful of Dollars on my list too.
Nice. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen this one yet. So in fact, the only one I've seen will come up later in the trilogy. I've only seen the one. But yeah, so it's on my list of shame. Hopefully I will get there soon. All right, so my number 3, I think that's where we're at.
Yeah.
My number 3 is In the Line of Fire. We mentioned this movie earlier.
It's a good one. It's a really good one, actually.
This is a really good movie. And this is Malkovich going like full Malkovich.
He's not holding back. Wolfgang Petersen's like, hey, you do you. You do you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it works for me. There's a heightened reality to this movie that was common during, the time, but it completely works for me. I believe it. Like I put myself in that world and I believe what's going on. There's a real, drive through the movie about what it means to protect someone, what it means to do your job, what it means to sacrifice. The Malkovich Eastwood performance chemistry is really good in this. You just get a real sense that they are, these fairly level combatants in this game of protection. And man, yeah, In the Line of Fire is definitely one of my faves. So I had to put it at number 3.
I need to go back and rewatch it because I saw it when I was fairly young. I remember it very well, but I'm sure that there's parts of this movie where we're like, you know what, it'd be a really good drama to go back to and enjoy.
I've seen it fairly recently, and it holds up pretty well.
Okay, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. I think it will. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, on to your number 3, Andrew.
This is where I have. It's probably going to get Trump. $1 Million Baby.
Trump.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that means we're on to our number 2s then. So Alice, what do you got at number 2?
I have American Sniper, where Clint Eastwood plays the very integral role of churchgoer. It counts.
It does count. See,
Yeah.
you know how this game is played. You get
Yeah.
Exactly. I have to say, when I went through his IMDb, I had 5 movies ticked
I love
on
it.
his acting, and I was
love
like,
it.
"Oh my gosh!" I was just like,
Right,
"Oh, good." And so I was very relieved too that this technically would count. So yes, American Sniper. Obviously, he's in it, but it's not really about him. It's about
Sure.
the Bradley Cooper character, and I have to say, this is probably the most transformed I've seen Bradley Cooper, and not just in the way that he like made himself look like a tank, but also in the type of character he plays. It's a very reserved, very quiet sort of performance, but still powerful. And I think, especially because previous to this, I had mostly seen him in very sort of like charismatic, outgoing type characters, especially, his earlier comedy work like Hangover and Wedding Crashers. So seeing him sort of then transition, into Silver Linings Playbook and like this, it's a nice transition where you could tell that he was really just picking up stuff that he could do something different with. And I, not an American, so I don't have that whole like military, or normal sort of stuff that might come with like an American Sniper or military type movie, but it still was really powerful to see, and it was tragic, and there was a horrifying baby that we don't need to talk about in it, and it was just I think it's also quite a long movie from memory, but I didn't feel like it when I was watching it. And yet there's nothing really, too like, I mean, there's intense moments and there's action moments, but I don't think that's where the main story is. And in those moments after the war, those are my favorite. Those are the most captivating. And it's such an interesting character study. So yeah, I loved it. So when I saw it, and it's been a couple years now, but I might revisit it, having talked about it now. But yeah, great movie.
Yeah, it's a little
really
over
well
2
done.
hours.
Yeah, I think it's really well done, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting seeing a movie that's different from the actual biography that Chris Kyle wrote, because I actually read this way before I saw the movie. But it's one of those rarities. I try not to be this guy, but it's just one of those inevitabilities where you look for differences, from book to movie. Yeah. But this was one of those rarities where I'm like, you know what? I appreciate this because it's interesting, because I can, while this may not be authentic to how Chris Kyle acted and stuff, I can still look at this movie and go, this is still a soldier. And seeing a soldier go through PTSD when he comes back home, whenever somebody slams the door too hard and, they go into battle mode or something like that. It was fascinating seeing that story told, because I think that is still a story that needed to be told. It may not be the Chris Kyle story, but it's that story being told through this persona of this sniper who's killed more than any other American soldier or any soldier ever.
Yeah.
It's fascinating seeing that. Yeah, and just like Alice said, seeing Bradley Cooper transform for this role, not even just physically, but seeing him do this kind of role was like, okay, this guy, he could be one of the greats. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Good pick. Good pick. I love Clint Eastwood's role in this movie.
It's very integral.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very compelling. My number 2 will likely get trumped. I have the good, the bad, and the ugly at number 2.
You're good. No, I'm joking. You fool.
So we'll talk about that here in a second. What is your number 2, Andrew?
This is where I have Unforgiven.
Oh, okay. And I had that at number 5. Talk about it.
This is his magnum opus whenever it comes to American Westerns. I think people consider this the quintessential American Western because it does things that most Westerns were afraid to do up until that point. Up until that point, you had the lone, gunman rolling into town, couldn't miss a shot, and Clint Eastwood had done many of those movies. But this one was the most realistic and hauntingly terrifying of all the Westerns ever made, really. Because there was such a sense of danger and dread in this movie that had been unseen till this point. Gene Hackman's role as Bill was just eerie because he was a man who could back up the talk. And you knew this movie was going to be different whenever Clint Eastwood rolls into town for the first time and he gets the ever-living crap kicked out of him by Gene Hackman. You're like, but this is Clint Eastwood. I've seen him take on Eli Wallach and Lee Van Cleef. He shot him from a graveyard, there was a standoff and he came out unscathed. How was this guy getting beat up? And you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those movies. And then, of course, you have Morgan Freeman, who is just killing it in this movie. He's doing such an amazing job as being the moral compass for this Clint Eastwood character who we've been hearing myths about and how he was one of the most terrifying, not even a good guy. Clint Eastwood's character is not a good guy in this movie. He's just, for the job that needs to be done, he is the lesser of the two evils. Actually, I think the movie is saying Gene Hackman is possibly even a better character than Clint Eastwood. It's just for the specific job that needs to be done to help avenge these women, that in this moment, Clint Eastwood's going to be the guy. It's fascinating because in this movie, Gene Hackman is playing the role of the good guy, but he's going to lose. It's such a crazy good movie.
Yeah. I had it on my list for a reason. I haven't seen it since it came out on home video, so it has been a while since I have revisited this. But I remember that intensity that you're talking about, and the idea that it was basically bringing, in some weird analogous way, it's kind of like what The Dark Knight did for comic book movies, like this did for westerns. Like there's this kind of thing where it offers a grit and a reality to it that westerns, when they were super popular, didn't kind of have permission to do in this way. And so, there's an element of authenticity there that it's really cool. And yet it keeps a lot of the what makes westerns. And so, it's not like it becomes a different genre of movie. It just becomes a real expanded version of that genre. So, yeah.
Yeah, so. I think without Unforgiven, we would not get movies like 3:10 to Yuma, the remake of it, I think that you needed this movie to finally open the gates of saying you can do a real Western. You don't have to do the hyper heroic Tombstone or Man with No Name trilogy or any of the True Grits or anything like that. You can do a real Western. Yeah, this is the movie that did it.
Absolutely. All right, so that was your number 2. So we were on to our number 1s. Alice, what do you have at number 1? I think all our number 1s can be deducted logically at this point, except for maybe mine.
So but, this is where I have.
No, we know yours.
Yeah, this is where.
You know mine as well. Yeah.
This is where I have $1 Million Baby. So this is, we all love a good boxer movie. I know I do. If it's done well, I really enjoy a boxer movie. I don't know why. But it's, there's something about the visceral nature of the fights and then the prep and montaging but this just brings something extra to that. Something that hadn't been seen before, and not just because it focused on a female boxer, but there was the relationships at play in this movie are something really special. And there's a reason it won like all the Oscars when it came out, but it is just so, I've said this a couple times now, but there's a quiet powerfulness to the roles that really compels you and really compelled me at least. And, especially all the way through, we can say slight spoilers, right? This movie's been out for like a long time. Yeah. The way it ends is just, it's so tragic. And the whole way, I feel like it's really going against where you've been conditioned up until, with cinema, where it's like, oh, she'll pull through, something will happen. And especially with boxing movies where it's like, they'll never fight again. And then they get up and it's all fine. Rocky. Yeah. And, that's just what you expect. And it's like, oh yeah, she broke her neck, but she's fine. Like that could be fixed. But then you're watching it and you're just like,
she hits that stool.
It is. Oh, the first time I watched it, like I knew it was coming because it had already been out for a bit by that point. So I knew what was going to happen, but I was still like, oh, I felt that like I had to hold on to my neck a little bit. And then the, lead up and you're like, oh, she might pull through. She'll move a finger or something, it'll be a moment. And it's like, even though I knew what was going to happen, I still hoped. And then it's so sad.
It didn't want to be that
you want
movie.
to talk about, it didn't want to. And it's just, and you got to give it credit for that because it could have given people the easy way out and still been a really great movie. Maybe she doesn't make it to boxing, but she lives. But this is like, no, she didn't want to. This is her choice. He knew that this is not what she would have wanted. And it is the hardest choice. And it's really about like trying to really fight between morals and ethics. Like there's a lot of themes at play here that I love it when movies get into this stuff where it's like, what would you do? I mean, we've talked about it before, but it's like, what would you do in this situation? And yeah, it's so powerful. It's so great. It's so much better than it could have been, that it should have been, like it could have just been a boxing movie, but it was more about humans and ethics and morals and doing what you believe that person is, no matter whether you think it's right, whether other people think it's right, and respecting the wishes, and it's like all the way going back to, even though someone might have themselves listed as a DNR, it's like you still have to sometimes make that choice. You still have to make the unplugging choice, or in this case the killing choice. And it's just like, oh, anyway, it's just, as you can tell, like it really affected me because it was one of the first movies of this kind that I watched. And yeah, it's just excellent. If you haven't seen this, you really, really need to. And the performances are amazing. The movie's powerful. It's definitely one that hasn't just been like, thought to be amazing because of the clout behind it or the awards behind it. Like it's actually a great movie. So yeah.
Aaron, was this on your list anywhere? Or
I don't like this movie. So I'll let you guys talk about it.
You're allowed to be wrong. It's fine.
No, I am. I'm allowed to be wrong every once in a while, and I think I probably am on this one. I need to revisit it. Let's just say that I legit hated this movie the first time I saw it. Like, it just was like I didn't like what it was saying. I didn't like where it went. And I think when there's that amount of passion, I owe it a revisit because it may have been doing something right for me to hate it that much. So, and especially as our viewing eyes change, all that kind of stuff, I owe this one a revisit in fairness. But yes, currently my only memory is really not liking this movie. So yeah, anyhow. Yeah. But Andrew, tell us why it's amazing.
No, I think that actually Alice hit every nail right on the head. This is very much Hilary Swank's movie. We need to get that right out front. I mean, whenever you have Morgan Freeman and Clint Eastwood and you're acting alongside them and you are outclassing them and outboxing them in every shape or form of the word. Yeah, there is nothing about her performance that isn't just perfection. The rise and fall is tragic, and the reason why you buy into that pain is because you, from the beginning of this movie, you want nothing but for this person to get their next chance because you have been indoctrinated from every boxing movie you have ever seen in your life that this person who is starting from the bottom is going to make it to the top and they are going to, see the green grass on the other side. And that's not this movie. And that is what makes it that much more painful.
Yeah. Where did you have it on your list, Andrew?
I think I had it at number 3.
So number 3 and number 3. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, on to my number 1, which we know is Gran Torino. I think Andrew had this on his list
number 4
as well. At number 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I owe this one a revisit too, but I remember being blown away by this movie, and this is the movie. I think this movie is what Cry Macho thought it was, like what it wanted to be, and
Very
this
much.
movie actually succeeds in that progression and in that journey. And there really is like a mentorship and a mutual learning that this movie in a compelling way shows you. And yeah, so everything that didn't work about Cry Macho, I think, works in this movie. And so yeah, I would recommend, if you haven't seen this, watching this instead of Cry Macho this week.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Content warning. If you're easily offended,
Yes.
oh my gosh, Clint Eastwood does not hold back on the racism in this movie.
No. He is absolutely racist in this, and the character is not sanded down in that way. So yeah, so trigger warnings for racial words, racial conversation. I should say racist words, racist conversations. All that is present here for sure.
Yeah, it's played off as lighthearted, and it's one of those things where you laugh because you're like, I can't believe he's saying all this stuff,
Right.
to the people, right in front of against overwhelming numbers. He is not holding back, but at the same time, there, like Aaron said, there is a love that blossoms between him and Tao in this movie. And I think I said earlier, whenever we were doing the Cry Macho review, that I think that this movie suffers from the exact same thing that Cry Macho does, and that is whenever you cast authentically among people, you're not actually getting the best actors. And I hate saying that because he was a very young guy whenever Tao was cast. I think he was 14 or 15 or something like that. But he's not good. But he's acting against a Clint Eastwood who is so amazing that I think a lot of people might even consider this to be one of Clint Eastwood's best performances ever. And also Clint Eastwood, I know this came out in 2003, 2002, something like that. Maybe 2006, I can't remember. But whenever it came out, Clint Eastwood was in his late 70s, early 80s. He was not
just a young kid,
just a young lad, but he was being, rough and tumble, but he wasn't doing anything in the movie that would make you go, oh, come on, Clint. He's not beating up hordes of people in this movie, He's letting, I guess you could say, muzzles do the talking for him, and any old guy could do that. Any old guy can pull the trigger on a gun. And I think that the character arc that Cry Macho wanted to have but didn't have is beautifully executed in Gran Torino. Seeing where Clint Eastwood is from the beginning of this movie and where he ends up is just it's incredible.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Andrew, it's time to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I had it at number 2. You had it at number 1.
Yeah, I love this movie. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I will talk because I have recently used it for my buried treasure because I saw it just recently, and so I've said a lot of this as well. But yeah, there are large sections of this movie where I wasn't necessarily completely invested, but by the time you get to the graveyard, it is astonishing the work that is going on in this movie. The cuts and the tension it builds. I mean, it is just a master class in building tension with camera cuts. So yeah, this is, if for no other reason, this movie is great. That standoff is just, it's more than iconic. You know what I mean? It's just it's
the best.
It's transcendent. It's transcendent. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen that scene because I guarantee you it was in my film class, my film studies class. It's going to be in every other person's film course. You get made to watch that scene in full and then talk about it for an entire class. And even with zero context at that point, except for a Fistful of Dollars, it was still you're still sitting there oh my gosh, who's gonna die?
Yeah.
It's so, the music, you want to talk about his score. What a score. What a thing to have scored,
for sure. Definitely.
The song where Tuco is running through the graveyard is called Ecstasy of Gold. And I think Metallica covers it, a lot. But it's one of those where he's looking at the graves, and it's the music just continues to build with this woman singing and the trumpets, and you're like, oh my gosh, you get up in the excitement with him. I've said this before 1,000 times whenever I talk about this movie. I love the fact that this movie has, it's all about greed and, these three guys who want this money. And each of them knows one little secret of where it's buried, but they need each other to get there. And so it's all about the greed, but at the same time, you have this truly tragic, emotional background telling of the American Civil War. And for me, that's where the movie hits the hardest. Like, yeah, you can't believe that these guys can see all this evil. I think one of my favorite lines in the movie is Clint Eastwood when he's looking at this battlefield, like taking place on a bridge, and he says, "Never have I seen so many men wasted so badly." And it was just like, yeah, because you're like, I can't believe it. And that captain that they run into, the drunk captain, like, I was just a great side character, and like them doing that last favor for him.
Yep.
Yeah. It's fine. It's a fine movie.
It's all right. It's okay. It's maybe high side of okay.
Maybe high side of okay. Yeah.
All right. That brings us to the buried treasure for the week. Before we get into that, I meant to say this at the top, but I just wanted to thank you for listening to Sif Pop. I don't often do this, but I did notice last month was our biggest download month ever in the history of Sif Pop. Over 14,000 downloads last month of the podcast, total downloads.
Wow.
Thank you for that. And that put us over 200,000 downloads total.
That's amazing.
And
so
and
cool.
yeah, and we just thank you. Just thanks for continuing to listen to the show. Like, seriously, and telling your friends about it. Like, that's really, really cool. So I meant to mention that up top. I'll mention it now before we head into Buried Treasure, just because I want you to know how much we appreciate you just downloading the show every week. That's pretty amazing stuff. So, all right, Alice, you are the guest, so you get to go last. Andrew, you're going to kick us off. What is your Buried Treasure this week? Are you kicking into the Andrew list of shame list?
Yep.
Nice.
And fitting, because today I have seen the sun or the Earth travel around the sun 35 times.
That's right.
So,
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So going all the way back to 1986. This is where I'm going to kick off my list of shame. And I'm going to start off with one of my favorite directors. It's one of his movies I hadn't seen, Hayao Miyazaki, and his movie Castle in the Sky.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I watched that the other day.
Yeah. Well, I really am interested in hearing your opinion on this too. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I really, really did. It's interesting because whenever I think of Hayao Miyazaki, I guess I'm thinking in his latter part of his career, like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, where there is a extreme, or even Ponyo, there's an extreme level of absurdity and like
fantasy. Yeah.
Fantasy. This one seems far more grounded and accessible to children. Like, it reminds me a lot of like his earlier work, like My Neighbor Totoro and stuff like that. But this one is just a happy, happy is a strong word. It's much more of a calm and peaceful viewing of a movie. I like the art style is fine. It's very dated, obviously, but the characters are so lovable, and the story arc is simple enough yet intriguing enough to where you're curious about this floating castle, Lanuda or Latuna. I can't remember the name of the castle that flies, but yeah, it's like, oh yeah, and then there's this kind of steampunkish, futuristic, world that they live in. It's a great watch. I highly enjoyed it. So if you like Miyazaki movies and you haven't seen this one, I would really recommend it. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. I'm going to take us to television. I watched the first 3 episodes of Why the Last Man on Hulu. And this is a famous graphic novel, is my understanding, and has actually been in several types of development over the years, movie scripts, TV ideas, just trying to figure out how to do this. And so here we go. Hulu has presented this. This is one of those high concept things that's either going to grab you or you're not going to be interested in it. The high concept in Y: The Last Man is that there is some sort of traumatic disease event, something that kills every existing man with a Y chromosome. So that is every existing man except one, and that is the last man. And also his pet monkey, who is also male, is the only male animal to survive whatever is happening. Again, I'm speaking from just the very first bit of this story.
Sure,
so I don't know where this goes. There's a lot of Last Man on Earth kind of idea here, except this is the dramatic version, not the comedy version. But there is really interesting stuff being done here with gender dynamics. What does it mean? A society of all women looks like, especially a society of all women in such a traumatic, tragic event. It deals with the kind of what if elements of this, to make a call back to one of our other reviews today. Like, there is kind of a real willingness to go there and go, what if this really happened and what would it really look like? And I'm really enjoying it after 3 episodes. There's also some really beautiful things, talking about the transgendered community and the idea that there would still be men in this universe, but they wouldn't have the Y chromosome. And so all of a sudden their life is so different because, they're dealing with their testosterone treatments, those kind of things are disappearing, and they're trying to figure out what it means, for them and their gender. And also because they are male appearing, that people are questioning, why didn't you die? And so, there's this, all of a sudden they're having, conversations about an issue that they thought was closed in their life, where they were just men now. But now all of a sudden it's all in question again. And so the show is really, really willing to go there. And I appreciate it. And the mystery is wonderful. It's handling the mystery so well, where it's like you want to know what's going on. It's, kind of really breadcrumbing it well for you and allowing you to invest in these characters as you figure out the mystery. So I'm having a really good time with Y: The Last Man. Very excited to see where it goes. I believe it is a limited series, and we'll see where it goes beyond that. So,
does this take place like immediately after all the men die off, or is there like a grace period or a grace period?
No, it's another one of the things I really like about it is it gets right into it. The very first episode is a little bit of in media res, where like you start in the future and then go back, like that everything is doing now. Like every movie and TV show is like, a scene and then 6 months earlier, it's okay, there is a way to tell a story at the beginning. Like, I get that we like this, but it has,
darn you, Tarantino, for your nonlinear storytelling.
So, but this does have there is a little scene that is, I think, something, like a few weeks into it that starts it with, and then it goes back to the day before. So you get the day before, you get the day it happened, and then it goes on from there. And it kind of jumps in time enough that scene we saw at the beginning is already in the past within the first 3 episodes. So, everything is now forward by the end of 3 episodes. But it does jump ahead. Like, and I kind of like that because it's not like I need to see every day, but I want to see the crucial parts. That's one of the things I really came to hate about not The Walking Dead, because that was never the point of The Walking Dead. Dead. Fear the Walking Dead, I thought the point was we are going to learn about the beginnings of, this apocalypse.
It was one episode.
It was not interested in that at all. And so this at least really gives us the grounding of what has happened, how they're recovering, what they're doing. And it's not jumping 5 years ahead within the first, 3 episodes. So, you're living in it. You're experiencing it, at least within the first.
I'm so relieved to hear you say that as a buried treasure, because I've had this on my list for ages since it got announced. And then it came out and the reviews were very mixed. Yeah. And I was just I was like, oh, do I really want to go in? Like, is it going to be worth it? Especially because you know what else they're doing a lot of now? Pandemic type things. So
Yeah.
like Sweet
Yeah.
Tooth just came out a few months ago, and now this is coming out. And so I was like, do I want to dive in? But all right, I'm going to keep it on my list. I'm actually going to get to it this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. You know, I mean, you know, results may vary, but I'm really enjoying for me, if you're going to be high concept, you have to deliver on that concept, and I think this is delivering on the concept, and that's a big deal to me.
Okay,
and
good.
we'll cover a lot of, you know, things that I may not like. So yeah, there you go.
Nice.
Why the Last Man? All right, Alice, what do you got? What's your buried treasure?
Well, it's very interesting because I'm also going back to 1986 and
Ooh.
I am recommending the movie Labyrinth. So this movie has such a special place in my heart, so much so literally because my partner's name is Toby and he was named after this movie. So Toby's a little brother in the movie, the one that Sarah or Jennifer Connelly has to save. And but on the other side of that, my mum is a huge David Bowie fan, and actually like she like met him because she used to DJ in Italy and stuff, and so he came to one of her sets once and they met, and so she's had this huge like thing, and so I grew up on David Bowie, and so it was like it obviously Labyrinth played a big part of my growing up, and I think it's the perfect movie to watch as a child that it traumatizes you just enough so that you can develop a little bit in your personality. But it's just, I really recommend if people haven't seen it in a long time or maybe not at all, like it's Jim Henson doing his best. I mean, it didn't do the best box office wise, but I think it's definitely like blown up in terms of a cult success since then.
Absolutely.
But you've got David Bowie in one of the most perfect roles for that man. Yes, it's a bit creepy that he's playing like a 30-something man preying on a 15-year-old girl, but it's fine. It's fantasy. We'll move on from that. And you've got Jennifer Connelly in one of her earliest roles, and you've got such fantastic puppet work. It's so cool. And the reason I bring it up is because Weta Workshop has recently just come out with the ability to pre-order minis that they're making of 3 of the characters. One of Sarah, one of Jareth, and one of Ludo. And my partner immediately like bought them, and we were going to get them in the second quarter of 2022. That's how Weta works. But it's just, it reignited, and I bought the Blu-ray for the 4K Blu-ray that is the 30th anniversary, and I'm really excited to watch it again, remastered. And it's so much fun. It's a fun fantasy story, and I don't think I have to tell you guys, it's for some reason it's hard sometimes to make a really fun fantasy movie, especially a standalone fantasy story, because it's easy to make trilogies out of it. This is just contained. It's very like, I would say similar to Princess Bride in that it's very like above reality in the fantasy world, but it also kind of takes place in the real world. And it's, the music's great, the cast is great, the story's great, and it's just a roaring good time. I really recommend checking it out if you haven't in a long time or haven't at all.
Jim Henson had that magical ability to elevate fantasy, childlike wonder movies and make them accessible not only to children but to everybody. Like I think with a lot of his movies, even his Muppet movies, that as an adult you can go back and you turn into a kid when you watch those movies.
Oh, absolutely.
I imagine
A Muppet's Christmas Carol is the greatest adaptation of a Christmas Carol ever.
It is my favorite Christmas movie. It absolutely is. It's funny you mentioned you have a friend who's named after this movie. Aaron, we had one of my friends on early in Sip Pop named Jareth. He was named after this movie too. So cool. A lot of people love this movie, man. A lot of people love this movie.
Yeah.
Well,
I will need to clarify it's my partner, because otherwise he's going to be like, I'm not just your friend. Yeah, it's my partner.
But hopefully and friend. Hopefully and friend.
Yes, and friend.
That is Labyrinth, which has the rarity, I guess, of being both available on Netflix and HBOMax. Either one, you can check it out there. The Last Man, Why the Last Man is on Hulu. And Castle in the Sky, like all of Miyazaki's stuff, is available on HBO Max. We did it, guys. We did a podcast. Congratulations to us.
I am so just proud of the podcast we've accomplished today.
I'm just sad the podcast audience I'm just sad the podcast audience doesn't get to see your squinty face when you do that. Thank
you know,
you so
actually,
much
funny enough, you know who did a really good Clint Eastwood impression? Norm Macdonald.
Yeah,
he had a really good Clint Eastwood. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Sif Pop is part of the Studio DNA podcast network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Andrew for hanging out again today.
Thank you, buddy.
Big thanks to producer Phil for producing the audio and video show.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks to Drew for doing the visuals that go along with the video show.
What a man.
And
what a man.
Thank
what a man.
you to Allison. Allison, it is so good. Alice Ginevra hanging out with us again today.
Not
Thank
Allison.
you so much.
Alice.
No, I know. I was
Not a problem, Aaron.
There you go.
Hey.
See, I knew we'd get there.
Shots fired.
I just like calling back my own mistakes. Anyhow, thank you. And where would you like people to go check your stuff out?
Yeah, so as always on Letterboxd and Instagram, I am Ali G. Mick. I'm also a writer for sifpop.com. So most recently, I have come up with my column of the month, which is the recommendations or one-stop pop. And this month it was Free Guy. So lots of video game or like fourth wall breaking type recommendations there. So check it out if that interests you or if you liked Free Guy. And then, as I always say, going through the MCU with my friends, but and so you can find that at once.upon.a.marathon on Instagram, and we've actually hit Ant-Man and the Wasp, and so we'll be taking a break for the MCU now until we can see. We're going to watch Infinity War and Endgame on all at once, so we skipped ahead to Captain Marvel and Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then we've kept the big ones because we want to watch that together in person for my friend's first experience. So for now, we will be going back to our original score of going back to the Disney movies of the 60s, and our next movie is going to be The Callaways, which, from what I understand, is about geese or something. I don't know. It's going to be weird. Check it out.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and it's always good to have you on the show. And peace and comfort to you as you continue to be in lockdown in Australia.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, I know that's no fun. You still haven't seen Shang-Chi, and I know you're dying to. So I'll just tell you.
Don't.
The last
Aaron, you
scene
should tell her how amazing Shang-Chi is. Just tell her everything.
I know.
Oh, no.
Do a play-by-play.
Much love and gratitude to our members of SifPop as well. SifPop members are at patreon.com/SifPop. Support starts at $3 a month. You get every bonus episode at a certain level, as well as some other fun perks depending on what level you sign up at. You can find out all the information, and thank you for even just clicking over there and looking at patreon.com/SifPop. If you want to connect with us, feel free to drop us a comment wherever you listen or email us at feedback@sifpop.com. You can also help us by rating and reviewing the podcast at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. That's a big help. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too, so make sure you let them know about it. And that listening is much easier than winning a fist fight in your 90s. We'll be back next week with Dear Evan Hansen and The Guilty, I think is what we'll be reviewing next week. So we will see you then.
Bye.
Video audience, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yes.
Jose, Computer Geek, a fellow Australian hanging out with us today.
Aussie.
Oi.
Oi.
Peter and Jay Bourgeois, just Mark. Glad to see
Yes,
all of you
Richard
hanging out
Jewell
in
is
the
a
chat.
Clint Eastwood movie.
And yes, Richard Jewell is, well, he wasn't in that movie.
Not
was
in the way we
No,
did.
but he's
not
not.
in the way-
It's a
he's
Clint
not in it.
Eastwood. It's a
He
Clint
directed
Eastwood
it.
movie. Yeah.
He directed
Yeah.
it. Yes. Yeah. We'll see
Trust
you
me,
next
if
time,
we
guys.
could have done ones he just directed, I would have been
Yes,
much
there've been a
more
couple
fun.
more. There've been a couple more for sure. All right, we'll see you next week, guys.